Hello, my beloved students. We proceed with another session as we discussing about the first element of literature, which is form. So on the first period, we discussed about the form, and the last two issues which consists on the form, and we discussed on the last period, which the first one is setting, and the last one the last one was a plot. A style. So today on this session we will proceed with another issue which is known as plot. So when we speak about plot, this refers to an arrangement or organization of events in a novel or play. It might be chronological plot, non-chronological plot, or flashback and foreshadowing. So when we are talking about plot, it simply means that how do we arrange or organize events in a literary work. And if we want to prove about it, let yourself trace back on several movies which you watched, and here you will prove about it. So there are some texts when you start to study or when you start to read, you can be surprised due to some actions which have been picked at the beginning of the literary work. Also, and this can be vividly exemplified in the play, in the Swahili play which is known as Orodha. So Orodha is one among of Swahili play, which has been written in Kiswahili. So at the beginning of that play, you can be surprised to see a lot of people in the funeral. But you can start to ask yourself, who has died? And why there are several people who are trying to fight so as to get a piece of paper who has a list of who has been written. So every character wants that piece of paper to take it. So you can be surprised. That's why it starts to see. It starts at the context where many questions can come to you. Also, if we are watching a movie, at the beginning of literary work, you may be surprised to see some actors who are running each other. So you can start to ask yourself, why are they running very fast? What makes them to run each other or one another? So that is a plot which you are talking here. How an author has been arranging, organizing events in the literary work. So that is a plot which you are talking here. So there are forms of plots, which are, the first one is chronological plot. The first forms or type of plot is chronological plot. Second one is non-chronological plot. In another term, we may call it flashback. And the last one is, the third one is placed first. The first chronological, the first form of plot is chronological plot, and the second one is non-chronological plot. That is vice versa of another form of plot as we discussed on the first one. So let us start on the first plot, which is known as chronological plot. The chronological plot, if the events are arranged in order or series based on the way they occur. So if you are reading a text or you are watching a movie or any kind of literary work, you may realize that the kind of plot which has been used on this literary work is chronological plot through how the events have been arranged. So the events starts to occur one after another. So if there is a person who has born, the way he or she has born, the way he raised up, the way he reached at the older person. So that you may see that it starts at the beginning up to the end of a certain age or a person. So that is chronological. So the events are arranged chronologically or systematically without mixing those events on the literary work. So another form of plot is non-chronological plot. In Kiswahili it we call muundo rukia. So it simply means that at the beginning of a literary work, you may see a person who is very aged, and he starts to ask him or herself why he failed to do a lot of things when he or she was young. So that is a non-chronological plot. So we see at the end, and later on he may start to narrate us or to take us back and tell us how or what are the issues which made him or her to be on that situation which he or she is. So that is non-chronological plot. So in another term we call it flashback. If the events are not arranged chronologically, that is when the events are arranged in such way the last incident placed first. So that is another form of plot. And another one is foreshadowing. So when we are speaking about foreshadowing, an author or an artist or a writer tries to tell us something which will occur later on. So an author can try to say that if you will be engaged in several love relationships, one day you will be affected by HIV and AIDS. So if you are not engaged in several economic activities or productive activities, at the end of the day you will be remain to be a poor man. So that is how an author tries to tell us something that will happen later. So that is another type of chronological, another form of plot. So here you may see if the events are not arranged chronologically, that is when the events are arranged in such a way the last incident is placed the first. So non-chronological order or flashback, the first event or incident can be placed at the end of the literary work, and the last incident can be placed at the middle of a literary work, and the middle incident can be placed at the beginning or at the end of a literary work. So that is non-chronological order. That's why events are not arranged chronologically or systematically. So that is another form of plot. Another one is foreshadowing. It's the technique by which the hint of action which will happen later in a story is given. So foreshadowing, as I was trying to tell you about foreshadowing, that simply means that if you can look or read a text, there are some events or issues which are being picked or delivered at the time which do not already be occurred in the literary work. So it is just a prediction of something which will happen later on. So that is foreshadowing which we are talking here. According to Aristotle, the plot should have the beginning, middle, and the end. So according to Aristotle, he categorized the plot into three parts. The first one is beginning, where a literary work starts, and the second one is middle of a literary work. So where a literary work is reached at the high peak. That simply means that it has been started. That part is usually to differentiate between the beginning of a literary work and the end of a literary work. So that is a middle. And the last one is the end of literary work. So where the literary work is finalized or is delivered completely to the audience or to the targeted audience. So the plot follows and the plot follows under 5 stages. The plot follows under 5 stages. The first one is exposition. So when we are speaking about a plot also, apart from these 3 parts of plot, there are 5 stages of a plot, which are, the first one is exposition or introductory part, and the second one is rising action, and the third one is climax, and fourth one is a falling action, and the fifth and the last one is resolution or denouncement. So let us overlook those parts of plot as suggested by Aristotle. Exposition refers to the introduction of the characters, setting, and the conflict. So when we are speaking about exposition or introductory part, this is a place or this is the beginning of a literary work where characters, setting, and the conflicts are being started to be introduced, to be realized, to be determined by the audience. So these are 3 issues which can be started to introduce to the audience or to the readers: characters, setting, and the conflict. And the second stage is rising action. Rising action refers to the point that adds complications to the conflict. It involves developing actions from the problem ideas to other new developed problems. So those conflicts which have been started to introduce on the first stage, that is exposition, are started to be very complicated. So it tries to grow up. It continues to grow up when can be compared at the first stage, that is the exposition. So if characters started to engage into quarrel or into misunderstanding between themselves, so here the conflict of these 2 people starts to reach or starts to rise up or to increase in a manner that make this kind of conflict or misunderstanding to be very complicated. So that is another or second stage of plot as suggested by Aristotle when he categorized a plot into 3 parts. Also another stage is climax. Climax is the turning point of the story and is meant to be the moment of highest interest and emotion. So when you are speaking about the climax, this is the turning point of the story and is meant to be the moment of highest interest and emotion. The reader wonders why is going to happen. So when you're speaking about climax, when you are reading or listening any kind of literary work, there is a point where those conflicts are reached at the high peak, at the manner that make those conflicts to be very wonderful. And if the people has been engaged on certain conflict, each one experiences different or difficult situation, how he or she may be engaging in case of solving such conflict. So that is another stage of plot. So those conflicts are reached at the high peak, at the point in normal words we can call it the point of no return. The point of no return. That's why those conflicts reach at the high peak. Even the readers of a literary work start to predict or to provide their prediction, what is going to happen, or starts to ask themselves what is going to happen. If that character and that character can meet, what is going to happen? How can they solve this kind of conflict? So that is, we call it climax. So those conflicts are reached at the high peak. So the reader wonders what is going to happen. So readers are being engaged, or any kind of wonderful are being created on their mind. They fail to know what is going to happen. How the several characters are going to solve a certain conflict among themselves. And another one is foreign actions. Foreign action, this point where the interest of the readers started to drop down. So this is a stage where readers, at the climax, readers were started to ask themselves how a several conflict is going to be solved. So at the foreign action, so here the suggestions of the problems are started to be provided. Even if the issues which were reached at the high peak, they start to ask themselves. So if a man has been betrothed his wife, so at the climax everyone fails to know how my fellow will assume on me, or how shame on me will be presented on her. But at the foreign action, they start together, or everyone, by using his or her time, starts to ask him or herself, why don't me forgive him or her? We started for the long time in this life, so why don't me forgive him or her and continue with our normal life? So that is the kind of suggestions which are being started to be thanked by several characters on the literary work. And the last one is resolution. So when we are speaking about resolution or denouncement, the point is which solution of the problem is found, and the suggestions are given out. So here is the end of the literary work, the final point of a literary work. So those conflicts are solved. So if there is a misunderstanding between two characters or between two tribes and among others, are being set together or at the table, and to see how can they solve those conflicts among themselves. So the suggestions, the solutions of different problems or difficulties are being provided. So those conflicts, those problems are going to be solved, and the different suggestions can be provided to show how people can overcome different problems or challenges in their life. So that is a last stage as suggested by Aristotle when he categorized a plot into 3 parts. And I want to paraphrase about plot here as suggested by Aristotle. So Aristotle suggested or categorized any literary work should be categorized into 3 parts. That is the beginning, the end, the middle, and the end of a literary work. But through those 3 parts of a literary work as categorized by him, also he continued to suggest or to overlook or to elaborate other stages of a plot apart from major 3 parties as suggested. So these are the stages of a plot. So there is a certain diagram which tries to show about this is a diagram which tries to show plot or stages of literary work. So the lines which have been drawn here do not appear here, but there is a certain line starting with exposition. So exposition is the introductory part, as we saw on the last, as we said on the first stage. So here this is the beginning of literary work. So when exposition, characters, settings, and the conflict are introduced at the exposition part, but at the exposition part tries to rise up. This diagram has been, this is one among of impact of technology. So let's forget about it. But here I meant that exposition part is the first stage, and the second stage here is rising action. So that is the second stage of plot. After rising action, climax I expected to be looked here, or to appear at the beginning, or at the high peak of a literary work. So at the middle here. So after climax, following action I expected to be looked at the right side where conflicts are going to be solved. So fallings. So those conflicts start to break down, to fall down. So thereafter the last one is resolution. So resolution or the denouncement I expected to be appeared at the end there, where solutions of problems or advices or how to overcome different problems should be provided at the end of a literary work. So after the all issues which we discussed about the one among of element of literature which is form, so I think we have tried as much as we can to overlook several issues which are included on the form. So those issues, I want to remind you something, that those issues which we discussed about the previous periods, especially or particularly in the form, I think it tries to prepare you theoretically, but I continue to make emphasis that those issues which we are discussing here, if we want to understand more than you think, you have to take these issues which have discussed theoretically into practically, so that will enable you to make to have a lot of understandings about those issues. So there is a task which I prepared to you, which prepares to provide importances of form. So there are several literary works which have been composed by different authors. So those guides or literary works which has been prepared by different scholars or different authors or artists, and among others. So we have a lot of songs. So there are importances of using this element of literature. So what are the functions or importances of form, if you think, or by referring those key issues which we discussed on the last or on the several issues which consists to the form. So the task here is, with examples, outline 5 importances of form in the literary works. So that is a short task which demands you to tackle about those key issues which we discussed where we started discussing about forms of literature. Thank you for listening to me. I wish you all the best. See you later. Thank you.